Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at Odyssey, Wrath of Poseidon from Ares Games. As the name of the game implies, this is a game that's steeped in Greek mythology. There are ships that are coming back from the Trojan War to get back to the mainland, or in the case of this game, the Sacred Island. But Poseidon has been angered and is bringing down wrathful storms to impede their progress. Now what this game is a one versus all game, which is a favorite type of game of mine, where it's hidden movement. One player is Poseidon and is trying to rain down destruction in the form of storms that will cause the navigators, the other players of the game's ships, to go off course. So Poseidon is going to be secretly moving the ships around behind his screen using these storm tiles. The other players are just trying to move their ships to the Sacred Isle, but they have to guess where their ships actually are since they don't know where Poseidon actually moved them. They're disoriented. There's too much storm front going around. They have to use the very few hints that Poseidon can give them in order to make their way to the Sacred Island eventually. Let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is played. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think.
Odyssey, Wrath of Poseidon is a one versus all game. One of the players takes control of Poseidon, who is trying to keep the other 1 to 4 players, who take control of the navigators, from reaching the Sacred Island over 11 rounds of play. If 3 or 4 of the ships make it to the Sacred Island, the navigators win. If Poseidon keeps them from doing this for all 11 rounds, he wins, although in a 4 or 5 player game, any navigator that gets their ship to the island still wins if Poseidon wins. To start, Poseidon picks one side of one double-sided board to play on and gives its twin to the navigators. There's a total of 4 maps in the game. Each one has the Sacred Island in the center and starting ship positions in the 4 corners, but each has a different arrangement of tropical islands, rocky islands, and deep waters. Next, Poseidon sets up the map in the actual game insert, with the lid serving as a shield. The navigators set up their map on the other side. Each side places the 4 different colored ships in their starting positions. From this point on, the navigators cannot look behind the lid to see Poseidon's map. Poseidon takes the first turn of each round, and uses one of his storm tiles. There are 11 tiles, and he uses 1 each round, thereby keeping track of the rounds of the game as well. Each ship has 2 storm tiles keyed to it, and there are 3 Great Storm black tiles. Poseidon declares aloud which tile he uses, and then proceeds to move one of the ships in a cardinal direction, or moves all 4 ships if he's using the black tiles, though he can't use these 2 times in a row. The navigators have no idea how the ship or ships were moved, they just have to guess. The second part of the round is for the navigators. They each take turns moving a ship 1 space in any order of their choosing and in any cardinal direction. If a ship has been moved since they last confirmed its placement, then they're only guessing where it actually is. They can use reminder tokens to suss out possible movements of Poseidon. The navigators declare their exact movement aloud, ship color and direction, so that Poseidon can adjust his board accordingly. Then Poseidon gives them hints. The navigators have perfect information of the space the ships move into, whether it's perfect waters or not, tropical island or rocky island, and the exact color of a fellow ship if they're in the same space. But for all 8 spaces around the space that they moved into, they know only imperfect information, numbers of ships and islands, but not color or type. Do this for all 4 ships, and then it's back to Poseidon in another storm. Eventually, the navigators will either get 3 or 4 ships to the center island, or run out of time and fail. That's the game. There are also variant tiles like sea monsters, lighthouses, and fog banks that swing the game's difficulty in one direction or the other, but we won't cover those in this review. Now, let's get to my final thoughts.
Now, I'm not going to lie, when I first saw Odyssey and I was looking it over, I'm like, okay, that game looks pretty cool. I like the artwork, I like the cover, I like the concept of it. As far as the theme goes, the miniatures, I'm like, okay, this is going to be kind of neat, right? And then when I actually got the game and actually read over what you do in the game, I'm like, oh man, this is just like a very dry looking deduction, almost like Battleship variants. I was not thrilled, but I soldiered on, tried it anyways, and I was pleasantly surprised with this game. I really enjoyed it. This is a classic example of a game defying my expectations. It's not the greatest game ever. It's not even the most innovative game ever. But for what it does it smoothly. It does it well. And everyone I played with had a good time. So let's start from the beginning. Let's talk about the components. The components are solid. I think the game looks good. The artwork, I mean, you're going to be staring at the box a lot due to the fact that you're using it as a shield the whole game. And that in and of itself is a cool thing that they do with the components. This isn't like earth-shattering. I think other games have used the box in pretty innovative ways. But I like that they went for it here, and how the insert is one of the best inserts I've ever seen. It kind of has to be, but it works well. The quality of the components is all solid. I like the way the maps look, the artwork on the maps, that you have the 4 different options is a good idea too, right out of the box. The different tiles and all the variant tiles look really good. The ships are nothing to write home about, but they're there and they function, and mine weren't broken. So I'm perfectly happy with that. If I could say one thing to sum it all up for the components do a fantastic job of staying out of their own way, which is what you want for a game like this. It's supposed to be very simple and streamlined and smooth and not fiddly. Definitely falls into those categories. The rulebook is also solid as well. It's a really simple game. This is like a gateway style game, so the rules didn't have to be all that to begin with, but I like that it gets right to the point, and you can have this game up and running in 5 minutes easily. As long as one person's played before, I should say. Maybe 10 minutes if no one has. That's how our first game went, as usual. As far as the actual gameplay goes, it's very fast. The slowest thing in the game is the navigator's turn. Everyone's huddled together, like, what do we do? Where are we at? That could bog down the game potentially. But I think that goes away over time, because eventually it's just like, well, listen, we have tons of options here as to where Poseidon potentially moved us. Let's just do something. We all have to be moving towards the center anyways. And that crux of the game, how you have a very clearly defined goal. It's just a matter of doing a little bit of deductive work to figure out what your best possible move is. That keeps the game flowing at a brisk pace. And it's very interesting. Both sides play very interesting as well. I played as both Poseidon and as one of the navigators. And as Poseidon, you do feel like this sense of power. Like, I can move all these ships, and they have no idea. And you feel like this cackling glee. But the game is balanced in the way, because as the game goes on, it's like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. They are really getting close to that island, despite my best efforts. Now I have to be more clever, and I have to be more coy, and now I got to start moving them in weird directions. I wouldn't have moved them before. It seems intuitive to move them away from the island, but when they get closer and now they're all within each other's radius, they might start seeing each other, the different ships. Now you might want to try to trip them up a little bit, do a little double blind thing. And then as the navigators, you would think like, oh, it can't possibly be as interesting as Poseidon. That's the Dracula effects, right? Well, no, it's actually very interesting as the navigators, because you have these 4 ships, especially with fewer players. I think the game is actually better. 2 or 3 navigators is the better way to go, especially 2. Because having control of the ships and just like trying to get the deductive method going on, especially when the game progresses and it's like, okay, wait, I see a ship and there's an island, but that could be that ship over there. It gets very, very interesting very fast. And again, I don't want to oversell this. It's not a very complicated game. This isn't like completely brain-burning deduction. But it's nice. It's a nice little puzzly game to try and figure out. I would actually say, aside from sometimes the AP with the navigators, the only problem potentially with the game, I cannot judge this right now because I've only played the game 3 times, potentially over a long period of time, this is the kind of game that might get a bit repetitive. I can see that happening. You do have 4 maps, that is something. You do have variant tiles, but essentially the game is going to be mostly the same each time. But that's pure speculation on my part. For now, I think the game does have quite a few games left in it. Every play that I had was very interesting to me and the other people that I played with, and I really enjoyed it. I like the whole, some of the variants are give or take. If you're going to do them, I would say do the one that, and it says it right in the back of the book, which is also helpful. Do one like the monsters, which weighs it back in favor of Poseidon, and then like the lighthouses, which puts it back in favor of the navigators, because each one has different special effects and will help each one side or the other. So using these different things can add a little bit more spice to the game. So overall, very happy with this one. I'd be eager to see what they can do with it in the future. I'm not sure what they could do for expansions, but for now it has a place in my collection. That is Odyssey, The Wrath of Poseidon. I recommend it.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.